I buried my husband 6 months ago, or at least I thought I did. I stood at his grave in the pouring rain, holding our 2-year-old daughter, and promised to keep his memory alive until my last breath. But then, 6 months later, I saw a notification on my phone for a transaction on our dormant joint account. A transaction made in a coastal town in Mexico that neither of us had ever even visited. My husband didn't die in that horrific car fire. He faked his own death to escape his family and cash out $1 million life insurance policy. I am a 30-year-old widow who spent the last half-year grieving a ghost, only to find out the man I loved was a cold-blooded criminal who used my grief as his final getaway vehicle. My name is Julia, and my husband, David, was supposedly the victim of a high-speed collision that ended in a fiery explosion. The police told me the body was unrecognizable, but the dental records and the car's VIN number confirmed it was him. I spent months in a fog of antidepressants and therapy, trying to figure out how to be a single mother while managing the $1 million payout that David had left for us. I felt guilty every time I touched that money, thinking it was the price of his life. I remember sitting in the nursery, looking at his old sweaters and smelling his cologne, wondering how I would ever explain to our daughter that her father was gone. I felt like half of my soul had been ripped out. But that notification from the bank changed everything. It was a $40 withdrawal from an ATM in Puerto Vallarta. David was the only other person with the PIN. I felt a surge of cold, nauseating terror, realizing that while I was picking out his casket, he was likely picking out his first vacation rental. I checked the transaction history and saw a series of small, careful payments for things like OXXO convenience store and beachside rentals. The reality hit me like a physical blow. My husband was alive, he was in Mexico, and he was spending the money that I was supposed to be using to raise our child. The betrayal was so deep it felt like I was drowning. I realized that every tear I had shed, every night I had spent screaming into my pillow, was a joke to him. He wasn't dead, he was just gone. The paranoia set in like a fever that wouldn't break. I didn't tell my mother, I didn't tell my friends, and I certainly didn't tell the police yet. I needed to know the truth for myself. I hired Marcus, a private investigator who specializes in international fraud and skip tracing. We spent 3 weeks in a high-tech war of information. What he found was a digital trail that made my skin crawl. David hadn't just died in a freak accident. He had been planning his exit for over 18 months. Marcus found dozens of encrypted messages between David and a document specialist in Eastern Europe. David had been paying for a full identity kit, new passport, new birth certificate, new social security number. He had been systematically moving small amounts of our savings, amounts so small I never noticed them missing, into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But the most disturbing part was the accident itself. The PI discovered that David had been frequenting dark web forums where people discussed life insurance arbitrage. He had procured a medical cadaver from a corrupt morgue worker 3 states over. He had staged the entire scene on a desolate stretch of highway, placed the body in the driver's seat, and used a remote ignition device to set the car ablaze. He then simply walked into the woods to a waiting rental car he'd hidden the night before. He watched the news reports of his own death from a cheap motel room, probably eating a burger while I was being told by an officer that my husband was ashes. He stayed in the country just long enough to ensure the life insurance claim was processed and the money was deposited into my account. He knew that as his grieving widow, I would be the perfect unsuspecting mule. I would hold the cash, pay the taxes, and clear the legal hurdles, and then he would eventually find a way to contact me or simply bleed the account dry from afar. I looked at the surveillance photos Marcus finally sent me from Mexico. There he was, David, my late husband, wearing a linen shirt I'd never seen, sitting poolside with a woman who looked 10 years younger than me. He looked happy. He looked free. He looked like a man who didn't have a daughter waiting for him at home. I didn't wait for a legal process that could take years of international red tape. I took my daughter, my lawyer, and the private investigator and flew straight to Puerto Vallarta. I didn't want a court case. I wanted to see the look in his eyes. We found the villa, a stunning multi-million-dollar white structure overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was a palace built on the foundation of my trauma. I walked through the unlocked front gate, past the infinity pool, and found him in the open-air kitchen making a margarita. When he turned and saw me standing there, clutching our daughter's hand, he didn't scream. He didn't even look guilty. He just froze, the glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble floor. "Julia," he whispered, and for a split second, I saw the man I had married. But then the woman walked in from the balcony, a girl in a bikini who looked at me with confusion, then annoyance. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I sat down at his expensive marble island, placed my phone on the counter, and laid out the photos of his grave. I showed him the drawing our daughter had made of Daddy in the clouds just the week before. I watched his face as the reality of what he'd done finally started to sink in, but even then, he tried to spin it. He claimed his family's gambling debts were so high that they would have killed us all if he didn't disappear and provide us with the insurance money. He said the sacrifice of his death was the only way to save the family. It was the most disgusting, manipulative lie I had ever heard. He had used his own daughter's grief as a bargaining chip for a new life with a mistress. He begged me to just take half and keep quiet, telling me we could live in a separate villa and he would visit us. He was trying to buy my silence with the very money the insurance company was going to take back the moment they found out he was breathing. I looked at him with a level of disgust that made my skin itch. I didn't answer him. I just pulled out my laptop and hit send on a pre-drafted email to the insurance company's fraud division and the FBI. The next 6 hours were a chaotic whirlwind of federal police and international authorities. David was arrested right there in his beach house, still wearing his expensive sunglasses. As they led him away in handcuffs, he didn't apologize. He screamed at me that I was destroying the family's future and that I was bitter and vengeful. He actually believed he was the victim. But the legal nightmare was just beginning for me. Because the insurance payout had been deposited into my account and I had spent some of it on bills and the funeral, the company immediately froze all my assets. I was being investigated as a potential co-conspirator. The federal agents didn't care that I was a victim. They only saw the money trail. I had to spend every cent of my remaining personal savings on high-priced defense lawyers just to prove I wasn't part of his death scam. The investigators combed through my entire life, my phone records, my private messages, and my bank statements, looking for any sign that I knew he was alive. I had to face the townspeople who had supported me, the friends who had brought me meals during my mourning, and the family who had helped me pick out a headstone for a living man. The social embarrassment was suffocating. I couldn't walk down the street without people whispering that I was the woman who faked her husband's death for $1 million. David's own family, the people he supposedly escaped from, actually had the audacity to sue me for a portion of the death benefits, claiming that since David was alive, the money should be returned to the estate, which they controlled. I was being attacked from every side: the insurance company, the FBI, the local police, and David's toxic relatives, all because of a crime I never asked to be a part of. It has been over a year since David was extradited and arrested. He is currently serving a 12-year sentence in a federal facility for insurance fraud, identity theft, and a litany of other crimes. I lost the house. I lost my savings. I lost my faith in humanity. The insurance company eventually cleared me of criminal wrongdoing, but they took back every single penny of the payout. They even sued me for the interest that would have accrued on that $1 million while it was in my account. I am now living in a small one-bedroom apartment, working 2 jobs, and trying to explain to my daughter why her father isn't an angel, but a man in a jumpsuit who we never speak to. David still writes me letters from prison, filled with plans for when he gets out and how we can be a family again, but I burn them without opening them. I realize now that he didn't fake his death to save us. He faked it because he was a narcissist who wanted the ultimate reset button. He wanted the money, the youth, and the lack of responsibility, and he was willing to let his wife and child rot in grief to get it. I am no longer a widow, and I am no longer a victim. I am a woman who survived a ghost, and I am finally building a life that is based on the one thing David could never understand: the absolute, unvarnished truth. So, what do you think? Should the insurance company have let me keep the money since I was a victim of his fraud? Or was I wrong to spend any of it before I was 100% sure he was dead? Could you ever forgive a person for watching you grieve at their own grave? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. This story is a warning that sometimes the person you think you know best is actually a complete stranger. If this insurance fraud nightmare shocked you, hit that like button, subscribe for more daily Reddit drama, and I'll see you in the next one.